Welcome back to the channel. We've all been raised on stories where the line between good and evil is crystal clear. The hero wears the cape, saves the city, and protects the innocent, while the villain is just a monster driven by greed or madness. But as cinema has evolved over the last few years, those lines have started to blur in a terrifying way. Today we are diving into a world where the bad guys might actually be the only ones talking sense. We're looking at 8 modern blockbusters where, if you strip away the heroic music and the flashy powers, you realize the antagonists' logic is surprisingly solid. In the hero might actually. Sometimes the villain was right. Let's get into it. Thanos is arguably the most iconic antagonist of modern cinema. And while his final act, the snap, was a horrific tragedy on a cosmic scale, his core philosophy is hauntingly logical in a world of finite resources. He isn't a power-hungry warlord or a mindless monster. He is a man driven by a radical, desperate sense of environmentalism born from personal trauma. Years before the events of the film, he watched his own home planet, Titan, collapse into a graveyard of bones because its leaders refused to address overpopulation and the depletion of life-sustaining resources. Thanos didn't want to rule Titan. He wanted to save it. And when they called him a madman and let their world die, he vowed never to let it happen to the rest of the universe. The deception of the Avengers is that throughout the entire movie, they offer absolutely no alternative solution to the systemic problem Thanos identifies. They fight with all their might to preserve the status quo, even if that status quo leads to inevitable mass starvation and societal collapse across thousands of planets. In the future, Thanos, in his own twisted and cold-blooded way, believes he is performing a necessary surgery on reality at one time. Random sacrifice to ensure the long-term survival of all living things. He doesn't target specific races or classes. His judgment is blind and, as he calls it, dispassionate. The most unsettling part? After he succeeds, he doesn't crown himself king of the universe. He retires to a quiet farm to watch the sunrise, truly believing he has saved existence. When you watch the film today, amidst the global conversations about climate change and the sustainability of our own planet, Thanos' mathematical approach feels less like a comic book fantasy and more like a terrifyingly relevant warning. The heroes fought to save individual lives, but Thanos was the only one looking at the survival of life itself. He wasn't just a villain. He was a mirror held up to a universe that is too afraid to face its own limits. Eric Killmonger is widely regarded as one of the most complex and justified antagonists in the history of modern superhero cinema. Unlike many villains who seek power for the sake of ego, Killmonger's rage is born from a very real, historical, and systemic injustice. While T'Challa and the previous kings of Wakanda chose to hide their advanced technology and vibranium behind an invisible shield, staying isolated and safe, Killmonger grew up in the streets of Oakland, witnessing centuries of global oppression, poverty, and systemic violence against people who looked exactly like him. The deception of the film is that for the first 2 acts, we are led to believe that Wakanda's isolationism is a heroic necessity to protect their culture. But Killmonger arrives to shatter that illusion. He calls out the hypocrisy of a nation that calls itself the most advanced in the world, but stood by and watched in silence while millions were being exploited and enslaved across the globe. He doesn't just want a throne, he wants a global revolution to arm the oppressed and flip the scales of power once and for all. Killmonger's logic is so undeniably solid that by the end of the movie, the hero actually admits the villain was right. After Killmonger's tragic death, T'Challa realizes he can no longer hide behind his borders while the rest of the world suffers. He officially opens Wakanda's resources to the United Nations and starts international outreach programs, effectively fulfilling Killmonger's mission just without the global war. Killmonger wasn't just a threat to the throne, he was the moral conscience that Wakanda desperately needed. He forced the perfect hero to look in the mirror and realize that his country's history was one of comfortable cowardice. In the end, Killmonger wasn't defeated by T'Challa's strength, but by the fact that he had already won the argument. He died a revolutionary who changed the world's most powerful nation forever, proving that sometimes it takes a villain to force a hero to do what is truly right. In Joaquin Phoenix in M. Night Shyamalan's Glass, we return to one of the most brilliant and physically fragile antagonists in cinema. The history Elijah Prin was released in 2009. Its relevance has only grown in the modern era of superhero cinema. Adrian V. Day, known as Ozymandias, is the ultimate subversion of the genius billionaire trope, while the other heroes like Rorschach or Night Owl are busy fighting street-level crime or brooding over their past glory. Ozymandias is the only one looking at the big picture, the inevitable new nuclear annihilation of the entire human race. The deception of the film is that we are led to believe Ozymandias is a typical villain planning a world-ending catastrophe, but the reality is far more chilling. He realizes that the Cold War between the superpowers has reached a point of no return. Humanity is a ticking time bomb, and the only way to stop it from self-destructing is to give it a common enemy. Ozymandias' logic is cold, utilitarian, and mathematically perfect. He decides to sacrifice millions in a single city to save billions across the globe. He doesn't wait for the hero to stop him. In one of the most famous lines in cinema, he reveals that he already triggered his plan 35 minutes ago. He isn't interested in a fair fight. He is interested in a result. The true horror of the movie is that, in the end, the god among them, Dr. Manhattan, agrees with him. The peace that Ozymandias creates is a lie, but it is a peace that works. He forced humanity to stop killing each other by giving them something else to fear. He wasn't a villain out of malice. He was a savior who was willing to stain his soul with the blood of millions so that the rest of the world could have it tomorrow. He proved that sometimes the only way to save the world is to become the monster the world needs to hate. Richmond Valentine, played by Samuel L. Jackson, might seem like a goofy, lisping tech billionaire who can't stand the sight of blood. But his motive is one of the most chillingly realistic in modern cinema. While the Kingsman agents are fighting to preserve the global order and protect the elite, Valentine is looking at the planet's fever, global warming, and the sixth mass extinction. The deception of the movie is that we are supposed to view the Kingsmen as the ultimate heroes of civilization. But Valentine points out a harsh biological truth. Humanity is a virus and the Earth is the host. If the virus isn't called, the host dies. And everything, including the virus, perishes with it. Valentine isn't killing people out of hatred. He's a radical environmentalist who believes that a massive reduction in population is the only cure that can save the ecosystem. His logic is cold and surgical. He offers a free SIM card to the world, promising connectivity while secretly using it to trigger a primal rage that causes people to tear each other apart. He believes that by letting humanity cull itself, the survivors will inherit a world that can finally heal. The most unsettling part is that heroes have no plan to fix the environment. They just want to stop the man who is trying to do something about it. Valentine is the only one in the room willing to make the impossible choice to save the biosphere. He isn't a villain because he's wrong about the problem. He's a villain because he's the only one honest enough to admit that, in nature's eyes, we are the problem. It's a strange feeling, isn't it, to look at the monster of the story and realize they were the only ones being honest. Whether it's Thanos' cold math, Killmonger's call for justice, or the entity's digital truth, these films challenge us to look past the hero's journey and see the cracks in our own reality. Maybe these characters are called villains not because their logic is wrong, but because their solutions are too painful for us to accept. Next time you're watching a blockbuster, and the hero is making a grand speech about saving the world, ask yourself, which world are they saving? And is it a world that